October 17th, 2003. The calendar marked autumn, but the air in Boone County, West Virginia, bit with the unforgiving chill of deep winter. A relentless, cold rain lashed against the windshield of Deputy Sarah Jenkins' cruiser, merging with the rhythmic thwack of the wipers, a monotonous beat against the encroaching darkness. Outside, the headlights cut weak swaths through the dense Appalachian woods, painting fleeting images of dripping pines and mud-streaked embankments. Sarah, a local herself, knew these hollows intimately, but tonight, the familiar landscape felt foreign, cloaked in an unsettling silence broken only by the storm. An anonymous, hushed tip about strange smells and disturbing screams had pulled her from a quiet shift, dragging her deeper into the isolation that defined this remote corner of the state. Every mile the cruiser ate, the knot of dread in her stomach tightened. This wasn't just another domestic call. The air hummed with something far more sinister. The cruiser finally lurched onto a barely there dirt track, little more than a muddy rut winding deeper into the unyielding terrain. The tires spun, spitting gravel and mud, as the vehicle struggled for purchase. Here, the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, usually a comforting aroma of the wilderness, was tainted. Beneath it, a more unsettling odor began to permeate the air. A faint, cloying sweetness, like rot mixed with unwashed linen. An almost sickly sweet decay that hinted at something organic and deeply wrong. Ahead, nestled precariously on a steep incline, stood a dilapidated cabin. Its windows, dark and uninviting, seemed to absorb the meager light, breathing the surrounding Appalachian darkness. No porch light, no sign of life, just a skeletal structure clinging to the hillside, a monument to abandonment and neglect. The very air around it felt heavy, suffocating, as if the secrets within were pressing outwards. Deputy Jenkins killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the relentless drumming of rain on the roof. She took a deep, fortifying breath, the putrid sweetness of the air filling her lungs, a grim promise of what lay beyond the cruiser's confines. Stepping out, the cold immediately bit through her uniform, the ground squelching under her boots. Emergency lights from her partner's vehicle, pulled in behind, cast an eerie, pulsating red and blue glow through the rain, painting the decrepit cabin in fleeting, macabre strokes. And then carried on a gust of wind, cutting through the steady downpour and the rustle of leaves. She heard it, distant, almost imperceptible at first, then clearer, the unmistakable, heartbreaking sound of a child's sob. A small, broken sound that confirmed their worst fears, echoing the silent question in her own mind. How long had this nightmare been unfolding, hidden in plain sight? Deputy Jenkins pushed open the splintered door, the hinges groaning a mournful protest. The air inside the cabin was a noxious cocktail of stale urine, unwashed bodies, and something profoundly unsettling, a cloying sweetness even more potent than outside. The single grimy window offered little light, casting long, distorted shadows across the squalid interior. Filth caked every surface, discarded food scraps littered the floor, and a pervasive chill seeped into Sarah's bones, far colder than the October night. In a corner, huddled together on a tattered, stained mattress, were two small figures, their eyes wide with a fear so profound it seemed to drain the color from their faces. A boy, no older than 10, clutched a younger girl, perhaps 7, shielding her with his emaciated frame. Their clothes were rags, their skin pale and grimy, bearing the unmistakable marks of severe neglect. Sarah's partner, Deputy Miller, moved cautiously, his hand resting on his service weapon, a silent acknowledgement of the palpable tension. The children, Caleb and Lily, flinched from their approach, recoiling deeper into the shadows, their silence more chilling than any scream. Their small bodies trembled uncontrollably, not just from the cold, but from a deep, ingrained terror. As Sarah knelt, trying to offer a reassuring word, a guttural roar erupted from the cabin's rear. Jedediah Stump emerged from a darkened doorway, a hulking, disheveled figure, his eyes blazing with an almost insane fury. "What in hell are you two doing on my land? You got no right." "This here's my family, my business. Get out!" His voice, raspy and menacing, filled the small space, a declaration of absolute, twisted sovereignty over his domain. The air crackled with Jedediah's belligerence, a stark challenge to their badges and the law they represented. Sarah, her gaze fixed on the terrified children, felt a surge of cold fury. This wasn't just a domestic dispute. This was a fortress of abuse, built on isolation and fear. "Mr. Stump, we received a call. These children appear to be in distress. We need to assess their well-being." Her voice was steady, despite the knot of dread in her stomach. Jedediah lunged forward, blocking her path to the children, his face contorted. "They're fine, just a bit shy. You ain't taking nobody from here. This is my home, my family, and I got my rights." His words, invoking the very American concept of property and personal liberty, twisted into a grotesque shield for his horrors. The confrontation escalated, forcing Deputy Miller to physically interpose himself, creating a barrier between Jedediah and Sarah. The children, witnessing the standoff, let out whimpers, clinging to each other. It was clear. These children needed immediate protection, and Jedediah Stump was not going to yield them willingly. Sarah made the call to dispatch, requesting Child Protective Services and additional backup. The legal and ethical lines of intervention in such a remote, insular community were always complex, but the visible signs of neglect and the children's terror superseded any claim of privacy. This wasn't a family matter anymore. It was a state-mandated intervention, a desperate rescue operation unfolding deep in the heart of Boone County, where the law often felt like an unwelcome intruder. The immediate aftermath of Caleb and Lily's removal from the squalid cabin plunged them into the clinical yet overwhelming environment of Boone County Hospital. Deputy Sarah Jenkins and Eleanor Vance from CPS were by their side, their faces etched with concern as medical staff, accustomed to the region's harsh realities, began their assessments. What initially presented as severe malnutrition and neglect soon revealed a far more horrifying truth. The doctors' hushed reports confirmed not only the children's physical deprivation, but also unmistakable, deeply disturbing signs of prolonged sexual abuse. Alara, brought in separately, remained in a profound state of shock, her silence a heavy shroud over the unspeakable trauma she had endured. Her eyes, however, spoke volumes of a terror that transcended the immediate moment, hinting at a lifetime of suffering. Eleanor Vance, with her years of experience, knew the delicate dance required to approach traumatized children. Initial attempts to engage Caleb and Lily were met with deep-seated fear and a chilling silence, their small bodies flinching at any sudden movement. They communicated more through their withdrawal than words, clinging to each other, as if the outside world itself was a threat. Alara, when she did speak, offered only fragmented, fear-laced whispers, often contradicting herself or shutting down completely at the mention of Jedediah. Her words, though disjointed, hinted at a life of absolute control and isolation, painting a grim picture of Jedediah's twisted dominion. It became agonizingly clear that direct testimony would be a long, arduous process, if even possible, making forensic evidence absolutely paramount. With the medical reports confirming severe abuse, the investigation escalated rapidly. The West Virginia State Police Crime Scene Unit, augmented by specialists, descended upon the Stump cabin, meticulously documenting every detail of the squalor, a silent testament to decades of neglect. Samples were collected, hair, fibers, DNA, all destined for the state's forensic laboratory in Charleston. Simultaneously, Deputy Jenkins initiated comprehensive background checks on Jedediah Stump, delving into national databases like NCIC, National Crime Information Center, and local public records. What they found was a stark absence. No prior arrests for similar heinous crimes, no significant paper trail beyond basic property deeds. Jedediah had existed as a phantom, his terrifying reign contained entirely within the isolated confines of his hollow. The preliminary forensic results began to trickle in, each finding a hammer blow against the collective conscience. DNA samples, carefully extracted from Caleb, Lily, and Jedediah, confirmed the unthinkable. Jedediah Stump was not only the biological father of Caleb and Lily, but also, chillingly, the biological father of Ilara herself. The scientific evidence painted a horrifying picture of generations of incestuous abuse, a self-perpetuating cycle of degradation hidden deep within the Appalachian wilderness. This irrefutable biological link provided the crucial foundation for the charges, transforming a suspicion of neglect into a concrete case of sexual assault and incest, pushing the investigation into unprecedented territory for Boone County's small sheriff's department. Beyond the forensic evidence, Deputy Jenkins and Eleanor Vance began the painstaking process of unearthing public records. Birth certificates for Caleb and Lily were non-existent, and Ilara's own records were sparse, hinting at a life lived entirely off the grid. Attempts to interview neighbors or extended family in the remote community were largely met with a wall of silence, a deep-seated reluctance to speak against one of their own, especially a figure as intimidating as Jedediah. Fear of retribution, coupled with a cultural aversion to outsiders interfering in family matters, created a formidable barrier. The investigators faced the daunting task of piercing through decades of unspoken truths, where secrets were guarded more fiercely than the law itself. The initial medical reports confirming the horrifying abuse, coupled with the chilling DNA results, propelled Deputy Jenkins and Eleanor Vance to seek an immediate, comprehensive court order. They needed not only long-term protective custody for Ilara, but also an extensive search warrant for Jedediah's property, believing the cabin held more dark secrets and evidence. However, their request met an unexpected wall of resistance from Judge Elias Thorne, a Boone County native known for his staunch defense of property rights and a deep-seated caution against what he perceived as state overreach. Despite the gravity of the preliminary findings, Judge Thorne, citing Jedediah Stump's clean criminal record and the deeply ingrained community ethos of self-sufficiency, denied the broad warrant. He demanded more irrefutable proof, a higher bar for intervention, effectively stalling the crucial next steps of their investigation and leaving a gaping hole in their strategy. Jedediah, surprisingly quick to act despite his isolated existence, had already secured the services of Marvin Maverick Stone, a shrewd, ethically flexible local attorney with a reputation for defending the little guy against government intrusion. Stone immediately filed motions to quash any further attempts at warrants, painting Jedediah as a simple, misunderstood man whose traditional, private life was being unfairly scrutinized by outsiders. He masterfully leveraged the deeply ingrained Appalachian distrust of external authority, arguing that the state was trampling on a citizen's constitutional rights to privacy and family. This strategic legal maneuver, while infuriating to Sarah and Eleanor, resonated powerfully within the local court system, creating a significant procedural bottleneck and forcing the investigators into a frustrating, protracted legal skirmish. The judge's denial and Jedediah's aggressive legal counterattack created an immediate, palpable sense of frustration for Deputy Jenkins and Eleanor Vance. The delay meant they couldn't immediately return to the cabin for a more thorough forensic sweep, nor could they fully engage with Ilara outside the strictly controlled hospital environment. Jedediah's lawyer actively limited access to Ilara, citing her fragile state and, quote, privacy. This legal quagmire not only slowed the investigation, but also exacerbated Ilara's already profound trauma. Every passing day without full access or a comprehensive search allowed potential evidence to degrade or disappear, underscoring the formidable challenge of unearthing decades of hidden abuse when the very legal system, designed to protect, could inadvertently become the first obstacle. The legal stalemate forced Sarah and Eleanor to pivot, shifting their focus from immediate access to a deeper dive into the Stump family's shadowy past. With the cabin temporarily off limits, they turned their attention to the periphery, meticulously searching for any faint echoes of Jedediah's existence beyond his isolated hollow. They scoured county archives, hunting for old property deeds, obscure tax records, and even faint traces in ancient census documents that might list previous generations of Stumps. They interviewed distant, hesitant neighbors, many of whom had lived in the holler their entire lives, cautiously probing for any knowledge of the reclusive family. This outreach was a slow, arduous process, often met with polite but firm refusals, a testament to the deep-seated code of silence that protected the region's long-held secrets. Yet Sarah knew, even the tightest knots could unravel with persistence. While the on-site investigation was stalled, the forensic lab in Charleston became their new front line. Specialists re-examined every scrap of evidence collected during the initial, limited sweep of the cabin. Soil samples from around the property, trace fibers from the children's tattered clothes, even microscopic debris trapped in the crevices of the decrepit furniture. They employed advanced techniques, analyzing isotopes in water samples to establish long-term residency and cross-referencing rare genetic markers from the DNA findings to national genealogical databases, hoping to find unexpected familial links or patterns. This painstaking technical analysis aimed to build an irrefutable narrative of prolonged confinement and abuse, a silent witness account that transcended the victims, trauma-induced silence, and the perpetrator's legal maneuvering. These new forensic avenues began to yield unsettling confirmations. The environmental samples from the cabin showed consistent patterns of long-term, uninterrupted human habitation, reinforcing the absolute isolation described. Even more chilling, the rare genetic markers identified in the children's DNA when cross-referenced started to paint a faint but discernible picture of a recurring familial lineage, hinting at generations of inbreeding. This technical data, combined with Eleanor's careful, non-intrusive interactions with Alara, began to connect the fragmented whispers of peculiar arrangements that had circulated as local folklore for decades. What once seemed like isolated, dark rumors now gained scientific weight, suggesting the Stump family's twisted history stretched far beyond Jedediah's immediate reign. The true breakthrough arrived from an unexpected quarter, a call from a hospice nurse in a neighboring county. An elderly woman, Martha Vance, no relation to Eleanor, a distant cousin to Jedediah Stump, was nearing the end of her life, burdened by a lifelong secret. Sarah and Eleanor visited her, finding a frail woman whose memory flickered, but whose guilt burned bright. Martha spoke in halting whispers of Jedediah's daddy, a man even more reclusive and violent, who kept his family locked away. She recounted vague, unsettling family stories of keeping the blood pure, and an almost cult-like devotion to isolating their lineage. Her fragmented testimony, though not direct evidence of the current abuse, provided critical historical context, illuminating the generational pattern of control and abuse that had festered in the holler for decades. Martha's dying words provided the crucial missing piece, transforming a horrifying, isolated incident into a deeply entrenched, multi-generational saga. Coupled with the irrefutable DNA evidence and the forensic analysis confirming prolonged isolation, the investigators now possessed a chillingly complete picture. Jedediah Stump was not an anomaly, but the latest, most brutal manifestation of a deeply ingrained family pathology. The legal barriers, though still present, began to seem less formidable against the weight of this emerging truth. The combined evidence painted a stark, undeniable portrait of systemic abuse, laying the groundwork for a renewed, more forceful legal strategy that would finally confront the shadows in the holler and bring Jedediah Stump to justice. Buoyed by Martha Vance's haunting testimony, which painted a chilling generational picture, Deputy Sarah Jenkins and Eleanor Vance prepared to make their strongest legal move yet. They meticulously compiled the new evidence, Martha's fragmented but crucial statements, along with updated forensic analysis confirming the deep-rooted genetic patterns within the Stump lineage. This was the irrefutable proof Judge Thorne had demanded, a clear narrative of prolonged, systemic abuse reaching back decades. They were confident this comprehensive package would finally secure the expansive search warrant for Jedediah's property, believing they had finally cracked the code of silence that protected the holler's darkest secrets, ready to expose everything hidden within the cabin. Their renewed optimism shattered abruptly. A hushed, anonymous call reached a reporter at a Charleston newspaper who, recognizing the gravity, immediately tipped off Sarah's contact within the state police. The caller alleged that crucial details of their new warrant application, including specific forensic findings and the sensitive nature of Martha Vance's testimony, had been mysteriously leaked from within the Boone County Courthouse itself. The implication was stark. Jedediah's shrewd attorney Marvin Stone had received this intelligence, allowing him to preemptively craft counterarguments and potentially even tamper with any remaining evidence at the isolated cabin. The integrity of their entire strategy, and perhaps the local justice system, was now compromised. The betrayal landed like a physical blow, leaving Sarah and Eleanor reeling. Their carefully constructed legal offensive, designed to overcome Judge Thorne's ingrained caution, had been fatally undermined before it even reached his bench. The immediate priority shifted from securing the warrant to containing the damage, and, more critically, identifying the source of the internal leak. This insidious breach confirmed their worst suspicions. Jedediah Stump's pervasive influence stretched far beyond the isolated confines of his hollow, reaching into the very institutions meant to uphold justice. It was a grim realization that this wasn't merely a fight against a single, malevolent man, but against a deeply entrenched network of silence and potential complicity that had allowed his horrors to fester unchecked for generations. The anonymous tip to the Charleston newspaper, initially a whisper, rapidly amplified into a deafening roar. News of the leaked warrant application, especially the chilling details of Martha Vance's testimony and the genetic findings, exploded across West Virginia. Local television news vans, their satellite dishes gleaming ominously, descended upon Boone County, transforming the quiet courthouse square into a media circus. Reporters, hungry for sound bites, swarmed residents, who offered a mix of stunned disbelief, long-held suspicions, and a fierce, protective resentment against outsiders airing their dirty laundry. The community, already fractured by the initial revelations, now found itself under an unforgiving national spotlight, a harsh glare that illuminated not just the Stump horror, but also the deep fissures within the Appalachian justice system itself. Marvin Stone, Jedediah's attorney, wasted no time weaponizing the leaked information. He held an impromptu press conference on the courthouse steps, portraying his client as a victim of a sensationalist media witch hunt and an overzealous state apparatus. With a practiced show of indignation, Stone declared the leak a grave constitutional violation, immediately filing motions for a change of venue and a blanket gag order, arguing that his client's right to a fair trial had been irrevocably compromised. He skillfully played on local anti-government sentiment, framing the case not as child abuse, but as an infringement on personal liberty and a traditional family's privacy. This shrewd legal maneuver successfully leveraged the very leak intended to harm Jedediah, further cementing the legal quagmire and effectively turning public opinion into another battlefield. The intense media scrutiny, coupled with Stone's public posturing, ignited a fervent public debate. While some locals remained stoic, wary of outside interference, a growing chorus of voices, both within Boone County and from across the state, demanded immediate action. Child advocacy groups from Charleston and Morgantown organized peaceful protests outside the courthouse, holding signs emblazoned with "Justice for Caleb and Lily" and "Protect our children." Their presence, though small, was a powerful visual reminder of the victims. Letters to the editor poured into regional newspapers, many condemning the alleged leak and questioning the integrity of the local judicial process. The pressure on Judge Thorne, already facing criticism for his initial caution, mounted exponentially, transforming a local case into a high-stakes battle for public trust and accountability. For Sarah Jenkins and Eleanor Vance, the leak was more than a procedural setback. It was a profound personal affront, a betrayal that threatened to derail everything they had fought for. The state police initiated an internal affairs investigation into the courthouse leak, a shadow probe running parallel to their primary case. Every interaction, every document, now felt tainted by suspicion. The fight for justice had morphed into a multi-front war, against Jedediah, against the systemic silence of the holler, and now against the insidious corruption that had breached the very walls of the courthouse. The stakes were no longer just about securing a conviction. They were about restoring faith in a system that, for generations, had allowed the shadows in the holler to persist, unchallenged and unseen. The Boone County Courthouse buzzed with a rare, suffocating tension. Every seat was packed, a grim tableau of curious locals, aggressive media, and determined child advocates, all fixated on Jedediah Stump. He sat at the defense table, a gaunt, defiant figure, his eyes burning with an unsettling intensity that seemed to challenge the very foundations of the law. Despite the overwhelming evidence mounting against him, Jedediah remained unrepentant, clinging to a twisted narrative of constitutional violation and religious persecution. His presence alone was a heavy weight, a testament to the decades of unchallenged dominion he had wielded in his isolated hollow, now brought into the stark, unforgiving light of justice. Deputy Sarah Jenkins and Eleanor Vance watched him, their own weariness battling a fierce resolve. The moment they had fought so hard for, fraught with the vulnerability of the victims and the intricate web of legal maneuvering, had finally arrived. This was the reckoning. The prosecution meticulously presented its case, a chilling tapestry woven from irrefutable DNA evidence, detailed medical reports, and the haunting testimony of Martha Vance. Yet, the most profound impact came not from the scientific data, but from the fragile voices of Jedediah's victims. Ilara's pre-recorded interview, carefully anonymized and played for the court, offered fragmented, fear-laced whispers of a life lived under absolute control, a testament to unspeakable trauma. But it was Dr. Evelyn Reed, the child psychologist, who truly brought the horror home. Her voice steady, she read an anonymized statement from Caleb, the 10-year-old boy. In simple, halting words, Caleb described a monster in the house, a shadow that brought fear and pain, a figure that took his sister and made her cry. The jury, a cross-section of Boone County residents, sat visibly shaken, the raw innocence of the child's suffering laid bare before them. The weight of the children's suffering, combined with the decades of the community's unspoken truths, hung heavy in the air as the jury retreated for deliberation. Days stretched into an agonizing wait, each hour amplifying the tension that had gripped Boone County. The world watched. But inside the deliberation room, 12 individuals grappled with the grim reality of the Stump family's hidden horrors. When they finally returned, the courtroom fell silent. A collective breath held. The foreman rose, his voice clear and unwavering as he read the verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant, Jedediah Stump, guilty on all counts of sexual assault, incest, and child abuse. A ripple of gasps and sobs broke the silence, a profound mix of relief and sorrow washing over the room. Justice, though long delayed and hard won, had finally pierced the shadows in the holler. Jedediah Stump's reign of terror found its definitive end within the stark walls of the Boone County Courthouse. The judge, his voice echoing with the weight of generations of suffering, sentenced Stump to multiple consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. This wasn't merely a legal formality, it was a conclusive declaration that his twisted, self-proclaimed sovereignty over his family and his hollow was irrevocably shattered. He would die in prison, his final years stripped of the power and isolation he had so meticulously cultivated, his grotesque lineage brought to a halt by the very laws he believed himself above. The verdict resonated far beyond the courtroom, a powerful affirmation that even in the most secluded corners of West Virginia, justice could and would prevail against the darkest of secrets. For Ilara, Caleb, and Lily, the verdict was not an end, but the harrowing beginning of an arduous, multi-year journey toward healing. Ilara was placed in a specialized long-term care facility, her fragile spirit slowly, painstakingly untangling itself from decades of trauma and dependency. Caleb and Lily, though separated for their individual healing paths, found solace in new, supportive foster care homes, beginning to experience the simple, nurturing environment denied to them for so long. The Stump case, a raw wound exposed in the heart of Appalachia, sparked a profound, overdue conversation across West Virginia. It led to a statewide reevaluation of rural social services, prompting discussions about increased funding and outreach, and spurring improved protocols for interagency cooperation between law enforcement, CPS, and local health services in remote areas. The story of the Stump family serves as a chilling testament to the insidious power of isolation and the enduring strength of those who fight for justice. It underscores the critical need for vigilance, the transformative power of reporting, and the unwavering resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable trauma. This case, though deeply disturbing, illuminated the hidden struggles within our communities, forcing a confrontation with the uncomfortable truths that sometimes fester in plain sight. If this compelling investigation resonated with you, if it opened your eyes to the vital work of protecting the vulnerable, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more in-depth stories, and watch our next investigation, a case just as compelling, just as vital, in shedding light on the shadows that persist.